Joining me on stage to introduce the keynote is Woody Marshall from TCV. So Woody?
Want to use this one? I have. This on? Good evening. My name is Woody Marshall, and it is a pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker, Brian Sharples. Entrepreneurs come in many shapes and sizes. Some are techies, other product visionaries, and other salespeople. Some are laid back, while others are intense. There are certain qualities, however, that all the good ones possess. First of all, they don't take no for an answer. They inspire, they disrupt, they persevere, they pivot, and they all move very, very fast. As an investor, backing the right entrepreneur is the single biggest determinant of the success of any investment. There are those investors that want to find a market that's so big a management team can't get in the way of its success. That's nice, but I'd rather bet on the management team. Brian Sharples is one of those bets that paid off big. He is truly a special entrepreneur, passionate, driven, strategic, impatient, and most importantly, a great leader. Entrepreneurs are sometimes born, but more often than not, they are made. They are products of their own experience, both positive and negative. That expression, "what does not kill you makes you stronger," was probably coined by an entrepreneur. Brian is certainly a product of his experience. The quintessential New Englander, frugal, individualistic, and unfortunately a diehard Red Sox fan. Brian went to Colby College, where he majored in skiing, math and economics, before heading west to the Entrepreneur Factory at Stanford Business School. He then did time at Bain Consulting, where he focused on marketing strategy for many tech companies, including Dell. But advising wasn't enough for Brian. So in the early 90s, that's right, he's a little on the old side, Brian moved to Texas and bought into a 9-person marketing information company called IntelliQuest. Over the next 10 years, Brian built the business to close to $100 million of revenues, took it public, and sold it to WPP. A great success for all investors and shareholders, but that wasn't enough for Brian. He needed to do it again. After he left IntelliQuest, Brian traveled a bit. He likes to travel. He thought about the inefficiencies of travel and the opportunity to provide a better experience for consumers, especially families planning a vacation. His first idea looked a lot like exclusive resorts, and in fact, it preceded exclusive resorts. But he realized that it didn't make sense to buy vacation homes when you could create a marketplace that allowed renters and homeowners to connect and transact business. There were some little guys doing it, but Brian wanted to be the biggest. He wanted to be global. He wanted to go big. Over the next 6 years, Brian raised over $400 million, acquired 11 companies, and built the leading global marketplace for vacation rentals, with over 600,000 listings in over 100 countries. Today, he has over 1,000 employees. Earlier this year, Brian took HomeAway public in one of the year's most successful public offerings. I've had the great fortune to have invested in Brian at both of my firms. In the fall of 2008, I led a $250 million financing for HomeAway. That was a lot of money. But as you can imagine, Keyman Life Insurance is very expensive for a CEO that owns a 2,000-pound bull and goes heli skiing to relax and unwind. October 2008 was a very ugly time to be investing. In fact, the stock market fell close to 5% on the day he presented to my partnership. But that didn't matter. We back big ideas, and we like entrepreneurs that inspire, that persevere, and that move very, very fast. It is my pleasure to introduce HomeAway Chairman and CEO, Brian Sharples.
Oh, there we go. Thank you, Woody. That was really a kind introduction. I've never heard him say such nice things. I do want to give a shout out to TCV. They have been really amazing investors. All our investors have been amazing. We have a couple here. Jeff Yang just left the room from Red Point. They're one of our early funders. I think Joe Kraus is here somewhere, but I haven't seen him yet from Google. They've been fantastic too, if you ever have a chance to work with those guys. The funny thing about Woody, I don't know if you noticed, but his face looks a lot like Buzz Lightyear, but ironically, his mom named him Woody. So maybe you're all too young to have seen that movie, I don't know. And I haven't seen Bambi yet since I've been here. I did notice, I went to the profile page on Vator, and I saw that your 3 favorite companies were Zynga, Twitter, and Airbnb. So that was, well. I haven't been to this before. It's terrific. We're from Texas, actually. We really appreciate being invited, and I'm really excited to talk to everybody. Are most of the people here entrepreneurs? It's a very big, shiny light. How many people have companies, are trying to get funded, and I guess the rest are all investors? And how many people from Airbnb? Any? Okay. I'm gonna just talk a little bit about, there's nothing really fancy on these slides. I just put together a series of words that sort of describe my own personal journey of being an entrepreneur, and I'm just gonna put them up and talk about as many as I can until the music starts playing, I guess. I've been an entrepreneur for most of my life. I have a very, very deep respect for all of you, for people who try to start businesses and come up with ideas, whether they're trying to change the world or solve a problem. Idea is really the first word I put up here. My dad was an entrepreneur, not a super successful one, but my whole life, that's what I wanted to do. I've always had lots of ideas. I find that the best ideas you'll find in the world are the ones that affect you personally, things that maybe a problem that you've experienced yourself. And I know a lot of people who start companies do that from their own perspective. You look at Mark Zuckerberg, right? He was passionate about meeting girls, and look where that got him. I had the pleasure a couple days ago of actually meeting Richard Branson, who was talking about how he founded Virgin Records. It turns out the reason he founded Virgin is he was 16 years old. He had a friend who was 15. That friend was a great musician, or at least he thought he was a great musician, and he was really passionate about this guy's music, and the guy couldn't get a record contract, and so Branson said, well, I'm going to start a record company so you can have a contract. So these businesses built out of passion are often very successful. My first company was, I guess, when I was about 17 or 18. My sort of passion at that time is I wanted to go down to a place called Martha's Vineyard. I don't know if people from California get that, and hang out for the summer and not work very hard, but still make enough money to take back to college. And so,
Right.
yes?
I don't want to throw you off here, but either we have to do this.
Oh, you
or
can
your
get rid of
mic
that.
is actually on upside down. I'm so sorry.
Oh,
about that.
hang on.
So
Like this.
Exactly. Is that better, guys?
Does that sound better? Okay. So anyway, my first business was kind of a total disaster. I worked for a while, actually. A friend of mine and I wanted to just work for a few hours a day, and Eggertown is a place in Martha's Vineyard where there are lots of boats in this big old harbor, so we borrowed a little money, and we got this old boat, and we turned it into this kind of floating oyster and clam bar that also served beer and wine. We were underage at the time, and we would go around to all these boats at cocktail hour, and we actually made a ton of money, had a lot of fun until we served some bad clams to a guy named Walter Cronkite. Does anybody know who Walter Cronkite is? And he turned us in. What we were doing was totally illegal, but luckily the business was on a boat, so we could just drive it away, which we did. That was my first experience. The next one was in my 20s. I was actually living here in the city, and I had, there's some similarities to HomeAway. I was selling a used car, and it was like a Honda Accord or something, and I had it listed in the paper at the time. There was no internet then. And, you know, people would come to see the car, and I'd have to wait for them, and they'd schedule it. And then I sold that car, and I wanted to buy another used car. And the car I wanted, I'd have to go all over the Bay Area. And it was just this huge time-consuming process. And as Woody says, I'm kind of impatient, so I came up with this idea to just get everybody who was selling a car and buying a car in one place, like on one weekend. And I raised $1 million to build this company that would hold these massive car meet events in giant stadiums around the country. And it was the first money I'd ever raised. It was actually from KKR, believe it or not, from the partners of KKR. I was nervous as hell. I so wanted this thing to succeed. We opened the first one down here at Candlestick Park About 50,000 people came. We had thousands of cars. It was all over the news media. We had built this massive test track, and we had entertainment stages. We built the largest auto parts store in the world. This company, Craig Auto Parts, brought in all their stuff from all over the country in a giant tent. And anyway, on the first day at about 12:30, this really freak-like mini tornado blew in and literally leveled the place, just leveled it. We had built these giant towers that came crashing down on people's cars. And this auto parts store just wound up in the bay. And there were people who got injured, but nobody got killed, thank God. Lost $1 million that day, just gone. That was my first big, and I thought I was just going to be absolutely ruined, and it was KKR. I had to go in front of George Roberts and Henry Kravis and tell them, like, literally in 3 hours I'd lost $1 million. And I did. They were actually great. George Roberts, I remember, sent me a really nice note saying, you know, you're never going to get anywhere if you don't, take big risks. But the thing that I really learned from that business is that having an idea is one thing, but being able to actually execute it is another. And I talk to now so many people who come to me, and I do angel investing like everybody else, who have ideas. And there's so much focus on the idea, but one of my biggest pieces of advice that I can give everybody in this room is, execution is everything, and thinking through execution is everything. In that particular case, I had bet too much in one place, and when I came around to 15 years later building HomeAway, I will tell you that all the failures that I had with that business are what made HomeAway successful. And I don't know how many people would say that they have tried something business-wise and really failed or failed big. Come on, admit it. Right. You're the people that I'd love to invest in, because there's nothing like failure to make you paranoid about all the things that can go wrong. That company, by the way, we ended up getting it refunded. It actually wound up, there was $120 million that got put into that company. It ended up becoming a company called iMotors. Oak and a bunch of other people put a ton of money into it. You've never heard of it because even with $128 million, it became a failure as well. It was one of those companies that was, there was too much physical plant involved. We had built these factories all over the country to remanufacture used cars and then sell them on the internet. The thing we had missed is we didn't need to do the first part. We just needed to build a marketplace. And so when the bust came, the business took a tremendous amount of capital to support, so we ended up basically selling it off to AutoNation. But that's the story there. So, years later, fast forward, I did have a successful run with a company called IntelliQuest. We took public. I'm older than a lot of you, and I will say that the accumulated wisdom I've had has made it easier for me to do HomeAway. HomeAway's been a dream deal. Just about everything has gone right in building that company. And if I had started it 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, I think it would have been a total failure of a business. Execution being the most important thing I focus on, and risk as well. So I'm very risk averse. I'm aggressive. I like to take risks, but I also now, because of my failures, really like to manage risk. And one of the things I really love, this company was called Noosh. He got asked the question about regulatory stuff. And he answered it the right way, which was, that keeps me up at night. That's something I think about. There's so many entrepreneurs that I see and talk to who just focus on the possibilities and the positives and everything's going to go right. Come on, there isn't an investor in this room that doesn't know all the things aren't going to go perfectly. Lots of things are going to go wrong. And what I get really impressed with is when I see an entrepreneur who shows me the downside as well as the upside. Because if you don't plan for all the things that can go wrong, then you're not looking at it the right way. And you don't need to do that just for, raising capital. You should do it for yourselves. I mean, the last thing you want to do is spend 3 years of your life in a business where you've kind of missed a key risk factor, and now it's 3 years later and you spent all this time. I mean, time is precious and life is short. So risk is a very important word to me. Now, how do you manage risk? Well, the way I've learned to manage risk is to be curious. You've got to be super curious about your business, your customers, your competitors. So HomeAway was an idea I got while I was traveling after I sold IntelliQuest. We were just traveling with my family, and we were renting houses, and it was kind of like,
There's no big site to do that. There's no Expedia of this business. And so decided when I went back to work, we're going to create the Expedia of this business, but I didn't know anything about the business. I didn't know how to do it. I didn't know what the right model was. And so myself and another guy named Carl Shepard took time. I should probably have the word time up here, because you got to have some time and patience to do this. And we got super curious. We spent 4 or 5 months finding anybody who knew anything about this business, customers, competitors. I think one of the smartest things we did is we went out and looked for companies that had tried to get in this business and failed. And one of the things we discovered was that Expedia actually had had a spectacular failure in this business. They had, several years prior, like about 1999, had bought a company here in the Bay Area that was at that time actually the leader in doing exactly what we do today. Subscription-based marketplace for vacation rentals. They paid $75 million for this company. I think it had $1 or $2 million in revenue, but it was hot. It was going up and to the right. And then somehow, a year later, it was this huge embarrassment for Expedia. They wrote it off, the business was closed, and it was gone. And I kept hearing that story. So I went out and found, I don't know if some of you guys know Rich Barton. He's gone on to do Zillow and some other companies. It turns out Rich Barton was CEO of Expedia at the time. So I didn't know Rich, but we called him up. We went and found him. He was gracious enough to let us come to Seattle and sit down with him. We said, Rich, you know, what happened in this business? And it turns out it was a pretty simple thing happened, which was it was a subscription-based model, very simple, like HomeAway is today. And Expedia, because they were in the hotel business and they were used to charging a percentage of revenue, and that's how that business worked, they decided, well, we'll just take this company. We'll tell everybody no more subscriptions. You're all now going to pay us 15% of revenue. And guess what? Everybody left, everybody quit, the thing went out of business, which then brought us to the next question, gee, why is that? So we went out and talked to customers. Now, I hope everybody in this room goes and talks to customers about their products. Even some of the things I heard in the last few presentations, I hope you've been out and validating this with people. There's nothing that can replace getting close to the customer. And in this case, we went out and asked the question, why? Why aren't these people willing to pay a percentage? People are willing to pay a percentage in all these different businesses. Well, it turned out that one of the most important things for a vacation rental owner was to have a relationship with the person who was going to stay in their homes. They were very concerned. These are personal assets. And what they preferred was a marketplace business where they could freely get together and talk. So the owners wanted to talk to the travelers. And by the way, the travelers wanted to talk to the owners, because these aren't like Marriott's or Ritz-Carlton's. Every house is unique. And so you have questions. Is there a crib? Do you have towels? What do you have in the kitchen? That kind of stuff. And so that marketplace model where you pay a subscription fee and then let people come together was what the market really wanted. We also found that most vacation rental homeowners didn't want to pay a percentage because they didn't consider themselves to be business people. They were doing whatever, 14, 30 transactions a year. They didn't want to deal with bills and monthly statements. They just wanted it to be really simple. And so at the time, every other competitor was trying to turn it into a hotel business. And we decided, you know what? The really simple, basic model is the way to go. And then our extra validation was that when we went around the world, in every country, in the UK, and France, and Germany, and Australia, and the United States, the leading company was always the simplest classified listing model. So we decided to move very quickly. For those of you who know HomeAway, we acquired all the leading companies around the world in this business, as well as built our own brand called HomeAway at the same time. Longevity is an important word, because I think one of the things we've done right at HomeAway in managing risk is we've really thought about how do we build this as a long-term business. Our goal wasn't to raise $400 million in capital. Our goal isn't actually to take the company public. That's just a little step in the process. We have a really long-term vision with this business. And one of the things that I think you all have to learn to do as entrepreneurs is not just look at the marketplace as it exists today. You have to use game theory and look at, if you're successful, what is then going to happen? Who's going to react? In that payments business, for example, what's going to happen if you are successful? Who's going to want to be in that business? What would PayPal do? What would the banks do? And so a lot of what we did in the early days of HomeAway was really tried to be very paranoid about how the market could develop. What's Expedia going to do if we get into this business? And because of that, it forced us to do things like raise $400 million so we could buy all the great companies that were out there. It forced us to do things like we bought a site in the US called vacationrentals.com for $40 million. We didn't need another site in the US. We bought it just because we didn't want anybody else to have the URL. So, we were really, really paranoid about the longevity of this business, and I think because of that, again, we've built something that's really going to last a long time, which is the goal I have for HomeAway. Now, capital played a huge role in HomeAway, and I think, $400 million is probably out of the norm. The reason we needed so much capital was because we did quite a bit of acquiring along the way. But, capital is obviously critical. That's why you guys are here. And so I wanted to just, in some of my experience at watching people raise capital and my own personal experience, talk about some of the things that I think are helpful in the process. One of them is absolutely humility. I mean, I know we're all type A people. If you're going to be an entrepreneur, you've obviously got a pretty high degree of confidence. But my experience is that investors really do want to see humility in people. They want to see that you worry, again, that you're looking at the upside as well as the downside. Big egos don't really buy a whole lot with investors. I know you want to be confident again, but I would much rather see somebody who's being very thoughtful, very introspective, very intellectually honest about the different paths that their business can take. Obviously, experience is super important. I know there's a lot of young people here trying to raise money. Experience and team, I think, go hand in hand. We were really lucky at HomeAway in that I did have a success before with IntelliQuest, so we didn't even have to write a business plan, really, and we got a lot of capital thrown our way, and you all too. I mean, think about your life as a series of baby steps, right? Maybe you don't try to grab the whole thing, your first go-around. It's okay to go and work for another startup and gain that experience. And if you don't have experience, trust me, again, most investors, the idea, all right, it's a good idea. That's baseline. Execution is about team. Good teams are about experience. So if you don't have the experience that it takes to build the right team for a business, you do have to go out and get it and partner with it. You have to know your strengths and weaknesses. Everybody has them. Nobody's perfect. I have just massive, massive weaknesses. I mean, the things, yes, I'm good at strategy. Yes, I'm good at getting people inspired. Yeah, I'm good at moving quick and having big ideas, but I'm just absolutely miserable when it comes to details and accounting and a lot of the really basic blocking and tackling things you have to do in a business. And so I learned that many years ago from some of my failures. And I've always gone into these things with kind of a COO partner, with somebody who is my complete opposite. And in this case, it was a guy named Carl Shepard. We did it together as partners. He's a co-founder of the business. I could not have done it without him. And so you always have to think about how you round out your team with the right amount of people. You've got to, in raising money, communicate passion. So just because I said earlier, be humble, that's different than having passion. You do have to be passionate about what you do, and you have to be able to communicate that. People absolutely want to invest with passionate entrepreneurs. Profit, it's a funny word. I loved all the questions today because a lot of them really were focused on business model and that kind of thing, and it's really the right thing to be poking you guys on. I mean, there are a few highly celebrated success stories of people who had no idea how much money they're going to make. Folks like Twitter, for example, one of your favorite companies that had a cool product, but for many years there, the question of, well, how's it going to make money? I don't know. Someday it's going to. That works in some cases, but the majority of businesses will never succeed unless you have really thought through that profit model, that cost of acquisition, that long-term value. HomeAway was able to raise the money it raised because from the beginning, we were really focused on how the business make money. We never had a year from day one where the company didn't have positive free cash flow. I know that's not always easy to do, but you've got to have a path to that to make it right. I think the last thing on just raising money I want to communicate is fit is super important. Money isn't money. A lot of people say, it's money's money. I'll take it from the guy who gives me the best price. I would rather give away extra equity personally to get with the right group of investors, because having investors as partners is really what helps you be a success. Every company goes through good times and bad times. I know. My board is littered with friends. Guys like Woody and all these guys are now friends of mine. And when we get into a rough patch, we're going to work it out together. And so you really should care a lot about the personality and the fit that you see out there with an investor. Hopefully you're in a position, if you do all the other things right, where you do have choice. I mean, a lot of people, don't have that choice, but fit, I think, is really critical. So once you've if you've been privileged enough to get the venture capital and you're off on your way and running, what are some of the operational pieces I've learned? Well, this one's obvious, which is speed. But I do, as somebody who's been in this business for a long time, I have to tell you, I feel bad for a lot of people these days because the market has got such a rapid response mechanism to successful companies now. Like HomeAway we were able to kind of operate under the radar for a while, and we didn't have any big competitors sort of nip it on our heels while we were building the business. But today, if something's successful, it's just unbelievable how much capital gets deployed into clone businesses. I mean, Groupon's a perfect example, right? I mean, Groupon maybe got to operate for a year before hundreds and thousands of businesses emerged. That didn't happen 10 years ago. Airbnb, who's in our space, same thing. They have an early success. Now there are people throwing more capital at this than Airbnb is. There's already a company in Europe that has a multiple of the employees of Airbnb that's trying to clone that business. So it's tough out there. And the only weapon you have against that is speed. You got to move very quickly. The other thing is if you don't need the PR to get your business going and you have a good thing going, then operate in stealth mode. Everybody has a tendency to want to tell the world how great they are and what they're doing. But if you really have a good business, keep it as quiet as long as you can, because everybody in this room is going to try to, clone it these days. And so that's a hard thing to not talk about the thing you're passionate about. But as long as you can avoid it, I would be pretty quiet. You, as CEOs and founders, have to provide leadership. That's super important. As I said, team and execution is everything. But you got to keep people motivated every day. There are lots of different ways to lead. Leading by example is obviously a very good one. But I think the other way that you lead, and it's something you can do very proactively, is to really think about what your long-term vision is and communicate that. We just took our company public, and it was a big event, and the company's worth a lot of money, and we've created a bunch of millionaires in our company, and so now we have this challenge of how do we keep everybody engaged, because we're not done yet, we're just starting. It's just an event. HomeAway is still, on a scale of 1 to 10, maybe at a 4 or 5 in terms of customer experience. We've got at least 5 years ahead to really make this a great business, and we got to keep people motivated. So, we go out and we look 5 years out, and you've heard the term BHAG, you create these big, hairy, aggressive goals. What is this company going to look like in 5 years, and get people excited about that? You need a higher purpose in your business other than, I'm just going to make money, or I'm going to sell this company to Google. What motivates people to work for you and be passionate about working for you is that higher purpose. What is it you're going to accomplish? What are you going to change in the world with your company? It doesn't have to be a global company to do that, but every new business that's worth money is worth money because it changes something, it makes something better. Flexibility, a really core element once you're up and running. I heard Eric Schmidt was saying the other day about Larry Page that one of the number one skill that he thinks Larry Page has is his ability to interview people and ferret out those who will change their mind on a dime when they're presented with new information and facts. And I think that's very true. Again, the reason I don't like big egos and hiring people with egos is they get stuck in their ways. They say, because I want to do it this way, that's the right answer. I don't care what facts you just presented me with. Good entrepreneurs are flexible. Your business model might have to change like that based on competitive conditions, based on new information presented to you, based on your investors who might be smart and have a good opinion about a direction you have to head in. And so don't ever sort of hold your ideas as something that your ego wants you to keep and always execute the way you saw fit initially. You will have to change. Important to take big risks. Obviously, you're not going to do something great unless you take risks, but I do think a lot of HomeAway's success does have to do with discipline as well. We've been really disciplined. We had almost all of our management team lived through the last bust. And because we lived through the last bust, we know that even though we had lots of capital at our disposal and to raise, money is a sacred thing. You don't want to waste it. You want to really maximize the use of that cash. And so you have to be disciplined. Somebody in your organization really has to be focused on making sure you get every little bit out of every dollar. And again, our discipline was, hey, we're about HomeAway grows top line about 30% a year. There's people like Pandora and others that are 100% growth companies. If we took all of our free cash flow and threw it into marketing, we could be one of those companies too, but we've chosen to be different. We've chosen to be disciplined. We've chosen to, earn a great healthy profit, 30% free cash flow margins in our business, and then we'll take the growth we can get. And that's just a different way of operating. But I'll tell you, we've got a really good valuation right now in the marketplace, and a lot of it is because I'm finding investors really appreciate that kind of a model. Second to last, obviously super important to have fun. I love the tone of this conference because it seems like you're all having fun and giving away beer and wine and ribbing each other. I mean, that's what makes what we do so incredible. The people who want to be involved with startups want to have fun. You need to have it every day. One of the things I love about Woody, actually, is that we meet every so often. And the first question, we had dinner last night, the first question Woody always asks me is, are you still having fun? It's the right question. If I'm having fun, I'm going to do great things. You have to make sure your employees are having fun all the time. You got to make sure you're having fun. It's a big part of business. And then, luckily, I think the last word that's really important to me is that if you do make it and you do have a hit and you are in the position, where your business can give back, there's nothing that gets your employees more motivated than together taking that success and giving out to the community. We now support at HomeAway. It's the proudest thing for me about this business, probably 160 charities a year. We're a huge supporter of Habitat for Humanity. Our employees built from scratch 2 whole houses in a week last year. We love it because we make our money off of people who can afford to have 2 homes. And there are a lot of people out there, obviously, that can't afford 1. And so we've sort of tied our company to that vision and mission. And I think it is something you can do at very early stages in your company. Maybe you're not giving hundreds of thousands like we are, you're just giving a few thousand, but it makes everybody feel good about the mission and the purpose and the success of the company. So anyway, with that, I think we are just out of time. I don't know if we have time for questions or not, but thank you very much.
We have about 3 minutes for questions.
I can't see anything.
Anyone have any questions? Oh,
Yes.
right here. Oh.
No forward-looking statements.
I've got a loud voice, I don't need a mic. I'm curious, what do you look for when you hire people? What's the single biggest trait you look for when you bring people on?
For me, it's the ego piece is big. So on the negative side, I just don't like people with big egos. I think people who are really smart but at the same time humble, to me, absolutely make the best employees. And then I think the second piece that we look for is really that flexibility question. Is are people able to separate their own opinions from what facts are telling them? Because facts are right. It's like, I have opinions. VRBO is one of the big sites we own. I personally don't like the site. I can't use it. It's really hard to use. I want to change it. But you know what? Millions of people love it. And when I am not the customer. Our customers are the customer. This is a segment of the market that loves that site. And so you've got to look for people, I think, who are trained to deal with what the market wants, not what they want. Yeah.
Can you speak really loudly?
Yeah. What's your thoughts on the balance between family and business?
Oh, they had, and I didn't fill out the whole thing, but I know I was supposed to fill out a profile on Vator, and one of the questions, but I did answer this question. One of the questions was, what's one of the worst things about starting a company, and it's one of the best? And I wrote that one of the worst things is you have to work so hard to really excel in the entrepreneurial world that it does take a toll on that part of your life. It's really hard. And I've got 3 kids right now. I'm 50 years old, so it probably hits me a little harder than it does somebody in their 20s. And so work-life balance is, I think, the absolute most difficult thing to manage. And the way I've dealt with it personally is I've had to let go of a lot of things and hire people to support me and trust them to make decisions, because you get to a point where if you have to be involved in everything, you do have no personal life. And so I'm still trying to sort some of that out. I'm getting better at it, but that is absolutely a really, really hard thing. Yes.
Can you repeat that question? What was Google's?
The question was, why did Google invest in the business? It was Google Ventures, which is a little bit different than Google. I think Google Ventures invested because, like any venture capitalist, they saw an opportunity to make money really more than anything else. Google certainly has the ability to look at data, know what market position we have. I mean, for example, they showed us some data from Hitwise that of a portfolio of the top several thousand keywords in the vacation rental business, 85% of the traffic that types in those keywords winds up on a HomeAway's site. So they have some insight into sort of the power of the business we have. But I think they really did it for ROI, A, and then B, because Google Ventures model, if you don't know, is if you're part of their portfolio, they will find talent within Google to help you solve problems you have. So for example, when we did the Super Bowl ad last year, we had a scalability issue. How do we scale to handle 1 million people hitting our sites in a 5-minute period? So we got to go meet with the scalability team at Google, and ultimately their solution was, let's just run it on Google servers, which they did for free very graciously. And so we were able to handle that problem. But it's been a great relationship, really good one.
Okay. Brian, one more question? Or we're going to wrap it up because I think I hear some people are getting kind of rowdy. Brian, here's your
Thank
Canva
you.
wine, and just one funny story. Actually, you brought up VRBO, so I actually know somebody who loves it. Actually, it's a friend of mine, and she started dating, and I said, wow, you're really dating a lot. And she said, yeah, I found this really cool dating site. And I said, which site is that? She said, VRBO. So anyway,
How does that
unintended
work?
consequences. You've got a lot of guys,
Can we monetize
I
that?
don't know. I think, there's an opportunity there.
Good.
So Brian, thanks.
Thank you.